Good evening, everybody. What a happy day this is. So nice to see you all here. Thanks for coming out on this beautiful evening. Not bad for February 1st in Iowa. We're 70 degrees warmer today than we were a few weeks ago. Yeah. Welcome to this happy celebration of George Washington Carver, an amazing person who did so much a long time ago, who continues to inspire us today. His work is as relevant today as it was over 100 years ago, and we celebrate that and we take inspiration from it to push on forward. Our program this evening is on behalf of the entire ISU community, indeed the state of Iowa, and we're sponsored by the President's Office and tonight the College of Ag and Life Sciences. I am Dan Robeson, and I have the privilege and the pleasure of being the Dean of your College of Agriculture and Life Sciences here at Iowa State University, and I welcome you here to this happy event. We are, as you know, celebrating the second annual George Washington Carver Day in Iowa. This is following the unanimous vote in both houses of the Iowa legislature and signature by Governor Reynolds last year and again this year to proclaim February 1st, George Washington Carver Day in Iowa. The effort to bring this special day to Iowa, and George Washington Carver is only the third person to be honored with a day here in Iowa. The effort to do that was led by two remarkable people, Ambassador Kenneth Quinn and internationally renowned and soul-filling singer Simon Estes, who are both here tonight, and they'll be introduced later and have an opportunity to address you as well. And that effort had a large group of people that moved to establish this day for George Washington Carver in Iowa. It was a tremendous effort, and we're all very happy about it. I had the privilege earlier today to attend a luncheon at the World Food Prize Hall of Laureates in Des Moines. And of course, some of these same people were there, led by Ambassador Terry Branstad and his Vice President, Mishal Hussein. And at that event, Carver Day, today at the luncheon, Governor Reynolds read from the very proclamation that establishes Carver Day. And here are a few excerpts to remind us all of what it was in that proclamation. And of course, they all start out with whereas, but I'm only going to say it once. Whereas, establishing February 1st of each year as an annual official day of recognition in honor of George Washington Carver. This is where more whereases come in. To reflect on the life and accomplishments of Professor Carver at the beginning of Black History Month and on the important role the state of Iowa played in his education and experience. That Carver's life provides remarkable inspiration. That Carver was first admitted to Simpson College, subsequently to the Iowa Agricultural College and Model Farm, now ISU, as our first Black student and first faculty member of color. That Carver went to Tuskegee Institute, now Tuskegee University, in Alabama, where he spent the remainder of his life applying his innovative genius to agriculture. And how Carver overcame racial roadblocks to become one of America's most significant agricultural scientists of the first half of the 20th century, and is a unique Iowa story with the power to inspire future generations. And of course, that's why you're here tonight, to be further inspired. I want to recognize a few special guests that are with us, and there are many in the audience. Thank you all for being here. I'm sure I will leave somebody out, and please forgive me for that. I'll go through these with some efficiency, but as I read your name, if you would stand, and then after everybody's standing, let's have a round of applause to recognize them, okay? So other speakers who are here this evening that will also be introduced later, but let me include them in this list as well. So fellow speakers, Simon Estes, Ambassador Ken Quinn, Rolandus Rice from Tuskegee, Jay Byers from Simpson College, Molly Simmons and Morgan Lang, students here at Iowa State. Bill Northey, I'm told, is here. Bill, the current president of the Iowa Agribusiness Association and former Secretary of Agriculture in Iowa and Undersecretary for USDA. Olga Bolden-Tiller, Dean and Research Director at the College of Agriculture, Environment, and Nutrition Sciences at Tuskegee. Dr. Ruby Perry, the Dean and Professor of Veterinary Radiology at Tuskegee. Dawn Melian, retired Vice Chancellor at Southern University Ag Research and Extension Center, and the 2019 George Washington Carver Distinguished Service Award winner from the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences. My fellow Dean, Dan Grooms, Dean of our College of Veterinary Medicine. Dr. Walter Sousa, who is a professor at Iowa State University and the newest honoree as the George Washington Carver Chair in Agronomy. And I want to give a special call out as well to the members of the alumni chapter of Phi Beta Sigma here, which was George Washington Carver's fraternity, as they were helping out this evening. Please help me recognize all of these fine people. Thank you very much. Professor Carver of Missouri to Iowa, via Kansas, to Alabama, and for the whole world continues to inspire and guide us forward towards improved lives and livelihoods, towards advancements in science and technology, and towards a more humane and gentle world. Carver's story is not only one of inspiration and accomplishment, it is one of courage. The courage he had, and it is his story, of overcoming adversity to continue throughout his life to advance others. It's also the story of courage of those who helped him along his way at a time when it might not have been so popular to help him. So courage is part of this story too. He is among a few truly guiding spirits for the state of Iowa and here at Iowa State University. And this evening we are thrilled to be back once again, as we were last year, celebrating George Washington Carver Day. This evening we have a terrific lineup of speakers, and at the end, please stay all the way to the end, we have wonderful ice cream from the Iowa State University Creamery. To kick things off, I'd like to call on some of our outstanding students to offer a glimpse of how Carter's legacy is still alive here at Iowa State University and in Iowa. They galvanize the imagination, they apply their entrepreneurial creativity. That is what students do today. Last semester, in this regard, the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences and the Ivy College of Business, together with the Papa John's Center for Entrepreneurship here, hosted the second annual Food Insecurity Challenge, led by Judy Isles and Carmen Bain. Over 100 students participated, and tonight you will hear from 2 of them. Dr. Walter Sousa, who I've already introduced, Associate Professor of Agronomy and George Washington Carver Endowed Chair, delivered the opening keynote address featuring the story of Carver and his efforts to end hunger. He encouraged students to follow Carver's example by thinking critically and creatively and kindly to find solutions to pressing problems about food. And the challenge was closed, the food insecurity challenge that our students participated in, by April Lopez, who is the Food Security and Basic Needs Specialist with Iowa State University Student Wellness. Undergraduate students Molly Simmons and Morgan Lang were members of the grand prize winning team of the Food Insecurity Challenge. Their recommended solution of student-run grocery stores in rural Iowa communities drew inspiration from Carver and also drawing from the lived experiences of members of their group. Molly and Morgan, please come forward now as I introduce you. Molly is a senior in the Global Resource Systems program and with a major as well in environmental sciences. And Morgan is a sophomore in global resources and a major as well in ag and rural policy. They represent so many students. Please come on up. They represent so many students who are involved in the Food Insecurity Challenge and are with them in classes every day. We've asked them to reflect on their experience and the many parallels with the Carver experience. While Molly and Morgan will represent all the students who are in the challenge tonight, there are others here who participated, and at this point I asked all the students who participated either last year or this year in the Food Insecurity Challenge to please rise and be recognized. They're not all here, but some of them are. There you go. Thank you. These are the students who step up and stand out and do extra things, and we welcome them here tonight. So with that, I give you Molly Simmons and Morgan Lang.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. As a team, Morgan and I and Danielle, our other team member, who cannot be with us today, we began the Food Insecurity Challenge with many unknowns, wondering what our project was going to be about, how our team dynamic would work, and the tasks that we would have to take on in order to reach the final presentations. In the same way Carver would have felt starting something new or walking into the unknown. We were tasked to come up with a solution to food insecurity in Iowa, addressing any problem we saw fit. The options were limitless, and it was difficult to know where to start. But the one thing that stood out at the kickoff event was the legacy George Washington Carver had on his community. As our keynote speaker, Dr. Walter Sousa, stated, Carver found his community and was driven by their plight and hardships throughout his professional career. He was inspired to make a difference for them by using his education and his strengths. And this struck a chord within our team, since most of us were Iowans, or are Iowans, challenging us to think about the food insecurity challenges our own communities are facing and how they might be solved. As everyone with educational or professional experience knows, innovation comes from trial and error, failure after failure, before there is an aha moment. Our moment came one late night in the library. The initial days after the kickoff event brought many challenges to our team. 2 team members had dropped out, and we had a page full of dead-end ideas, but no concrete solution that we were excited about. And of course, we had a fast approaching deadline. Frustrated with this lack of progress, we finally stopped researching, stopped generating new ideas, and started discussing with one another why we were even involved in this project and in this challenge. But we all agreed that it was to create positive change within local Iowa communities. So finally, after sharing our own personal and community experiences with food insecurity and entrepreneurship, our solution finally clicked, and we had our aha moment. We came up with our solution the night before we had to present our initial plan to a mentor. So this obviously sparked lots of motivation to get all the work done and to work on all of the aspects for our final product. And the combination of lived experience and technical knowledge was really incredibly powerful for getting us over that uphill battle that we initially faced. Just like Carver, we harnessed our shared and unique strengths to bring about positive change that would impact the rural communities like the ones we grew up in. Carver harnessed both of these to be able to bring about change not only in his community, but also all over the world.
While we were excited about the possibility of our idea, we were still unsure if it would be feasible for the challenge and needed some mentorship to guide us through our next steps. The following day, we shared our idea with our mentor, and she was encouraged and excited by our proposed solution. She pushed us to ask questions we did not originally think about and gave us actionable steps to take to make this idea tangible. Most importantly, our mentor gave us the confidence in ourselves and the motivation to persevere despite the initial challenges that our team faced. In a small way, this reflects the mentorship and inspiration Carver received from people like Dr. Pamel and the Milhollans, who encouraged him to pursue an education. Carver once wrote, "Where there is no vision, there is no hope." Our mentor gave us hope and made us excited and driven to transform our vision of an idea into a reality. That same hope and drive carried us to the pitch competitions, where we went on to present our idea in the Food Insecurity Challenge. We were honored to receive first place recognition as a team. However, the process itself is where we had learned the most. In reflecting on our experience with innovation, we were reminded of the remarkable George Washington Carver, who was an inspiration for us throughout this entire process. Though the hardships he endured may not compare to ours, his resilience and wisdom can still serve as motivation for us all. Carver has had a profound impact on numerous people and institutions alike. He once stated, "Since new developments are the products of a creative mind, we must therefore stimulate and encourage that kind of mind in every way possible." We are grateful to the opportunities Iowa State University provides students like us to ignite and support ingenuity. George Washington Carver is well known for embodying pillars of humility, knowledge, creativity, and service. His legacy continues to inspire students like us to use our innovative ideas to solve community, national, and global issues. We are delighted to commemorate this legacy with all of you, not only today on February 1st, but every day of our lives. Thank you.
It is my great pleasure to introduce to you tonight the keynote speaker this evening, Mr. Paxton Williams. Paxton is a proud Iowa State alum and accomplished attorney. He has served in leadership roles at the state and national level, including serving as president of the Iowa National Bar Association. This past November, Paxton received the 2023 Carrie Chapman Catt Public Engagement Award from the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, both for his professional work as his efforts promoting the legacy of Dr. Carver. Paxton spent 5 years promoting Dr. Carver, researching and writing a one-man play and performing the play over 400 times across 24 states and in England. He served as the executive director of the George Washington Carver Birthplace Association and was associate producer for the Iowa Public Broadcasting System's documentary on Carver. Please join me in welcoming Paxton Williams as he presents A Visit with Professor George Washington Carver.
As I said on that radio program last year, when my train left the golden wheat fields and the tall green corn of Iowa for the acres and acres of cotton, nothing but cotton, my heart sank a little. The scraggly cotton grew up close to the cabin door. A few lonesome collards, the only sign of vegetables. Stunted cattle, bony mules, fields and hillsides cracked and scarred with gullies and deep ruts. Not much evidence of scientific farming anywhere. Everything looked hungry. The land, the cotton, the cattle, and the people. When I finally arrived in Tuskegee, the principal, Booker T. Washington, the T stood for Tolliver, he informed me that he didn't have any money available to equip me with the laboratory. Now, while I wasn't expecting the type of laboratory I had at the Iowa Agricultural College in Ames, I was expecting something. Well, fortunately, this lack of a laboratory gave me the perfect opportunity to teach my students a very valuable lesson. I wanted my students to know that there was no such thing as waste. I wanted them to know that if they used their imagination and their creativity, they could make for themselves anything that they might need. And well, this lack of a laboratory gave me the perfect opportunity to show them what I meant. I told my students one day, I said, students, when you're done with your chores for the day, come back to the classroom. We're going to take us a walk and go get our laboratory. They all came back that afternoon after they finished the chores, and we went for a walk. And do you know where we ended up? Do you know? Well, I'll tell you. We ended up at the town dump, the junkyard. And I told the students that anything they saw there that they thought they could use in the laboratory to pick up and bring back with them. I told them we would sort it out in class. They found old glass bottles, but we didn't call them old glass bottles. We called them beakers. They found old fruit jar lids. We didn't call them old fruit jar lids. We called them petri dishes. Sometimes we poked holes in them and called them strainers. We found old wagon wheels we could use to till up the soil, old parts of ladles that we could use as part of a burner, old charred pieces of wood we would use as writing utensils. I tell you, we searched in that junk pile several hours, and a number of things happened. Let's see. We got tired, we got dirty, and we got smelly. But from that junk, we had created for ourselves the instruments of our education. Isn't that something? Of course that's something. You know what the people say, one man's trash, is another man's treasure. Oh, I'll tell you, my students are a good bunch. Not only did they help me build a laboratory, but they took the straw. And from the straw, they made bricks. And from those bricks, they built the very buildings they went to class in. And I'll tell you, those weren't some little old, shabby old little buildings either. They'd all been designed by the campus architect, R.R. Taylor, the first Negro graduate from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Now, I believe I was at Tuskegee maybe 10 years or so when I met my greatest enemy. Though some have said perhaps it was my greatest friend. Do you know who I'm talking about? Well, I'll tell you. The United States Department of Agriculture, one of their officials, called it a wave of evil in 1903. Some folks know it as it's being from the beetle family, and they call it Anthnomus grandis. That's not what we called it. We called it the boll weevil. I'll tell you about the boll weevil. The boll weevil is a revered figure down south. And starting about the turn of the century, it started decimating the cotton crops. But even before the arrival of the boll weevil, the cotton farmers in the South, they were already seeing reduced yields because, as you may know, cotton takes nitrogen from the soil, over time reducing the soil's ability to nourish the plant. So even before the arrival of the boll weevil, there was a problem. With the boll weevil, that problem became one of epic proportion. I decided I was going to see what I could do to help solve that problem. And I wasn't exactly certain how I should do it or what sort of crop I could or should promote. But I knew it had to fulfill 3 needs. 1, I knew it had to not be susceptible to the boll weevil. 2, if possible, I knew it had to put nitrogen back in the soil, which I knew from previous research, legumes, these are peas, beans, pod-bearing plants. I knew these could do this. And finally, I needed a crop that could be useful. Wasn't exactly certain what that crop could be, but I knew it needed to fulfill those 3 needs. So I'll tell you, one morning, I was going on one of my 4 a.m. walks, as I do every day. I'm always up at 4 a.m., and I was going on one of my walks, and I decided to have a talk with the great creator, as I often do. And I asked the creator why he made the universe. The great creator, thought that was maybe somewhat odd that little old me was asking such a big question like that. And he told me told me to improve my question. So then I asked him why he made man. Again, still didn't necessarily like that question. He told me to cut down the extent of the request and improve the intent. So I thought, well, maybe I'll ask something a little more simple, something smaller. So I did. I asked him why he made the goober pea, or the peanut, you may call it. I asked him why he made the peanut. And believe it or not, he told me over 300 times. Food, body products, facial products, products for the home, linoleum, axle grease, fuel briquettes, all antiseptic soap, all of these, tannic acid, all of these things could be made from the lowly peanut. After I learned it, I sought to share it with my students. Then I sought to share it with the local farmers. Then I sought to share it with the entire United States. That's right. In 1921, I went to Congress. I testified in support of a tariff on foreign peanuts. My testimony was only supposed to last 10 minutes. But after I pulled out my treasure box with all of my peanut and sweet potato inventions, I was granted several extensions and spoke for nearly 2 hours. Don't worry, I won't do that this evening. And when one congressman from Rhode Island, I believe, asked me if I wanted any watermelon to go along with my peanuts, it was the Texan, John Nance Garner, later Speaker of the House and later Vice President, who chastised that fellow and encouraged me to continue enlightening the group. I'm proud to say that after that testimony, perhaps in some small measure because of it, the Fortney-McCumber Act became law, which benefited many of the Southern farmers who I was trying to assist. Now, after that testimony, I started to achieve a bit of fame, and I got a number of awards. I received the Theodore Roosevelt Medal, presented to me by his son in Atlantic City. I received an award from the Variety Clubs of America. I received the Spingern Medal from the NAACP, that's their highest honor. And I received 2 awards that really surprised me. The first occurred when I was honored by the United Daughters of the Confederacy. Does that surprise you? It certainly surprised me. It certainly surprised me. I was also surprised when I was named a fellow to the Royal Society for the Encouragement of the Arts, Commerce, and Manufactures in London, England. It was very rare for any American, let alone a Negro, to receive such an award. And so I was really honored and inspired by that. And it encouraged me to continue doing my work. Here in Tuskegee, they even built a museum and dedicated it to my years of service here. Do you know who came to the dedication? Well, I'll tell you. Henry Ford came to the dedication. I should tell you a little bit about Henry Ford. We met in 37 or so in Dearborn, Michigan. We met at a Chemergy conference. Chemergy, as you may know, is the development of industrial uses for farm byproducts. Henry Ford, he wanted me to work with him to come up with ways to create synthetic plastics. And we've done that. I know many of you you may have seen that video of the two of us where we're working with that plastic that we made with soybeans and sweet potatoes. And he wanted me to come work for him, but I turned him down because I really believe in what I'm doing here at Tuskegee. Now, I will say this, he's still been a good friend. He built a school for children near his home in Wayne, Georgia, and named it after me. Me and the Tuskegee president attended that dedication. He saw how tough it was for me to walk up the 2 flights of stairs to get in the dormitory room I live in, and he paid to have an elevator installed for my use. He even built a replica of the cabin that I was born in to put in his Greenfield village. You probably saw pictures of me at that dedication. Now, I consider Henry Ford a dear friend. I really do. But I will say this, we don't agree on everything. In terms of other famous people, you maybe heard that radio program I did with Joe Louis. Wasn't that something when he knocked out Max Spelling a few years ago? Wasn't that something? No, wasn't that something? Yeah, that was something. That was something when he did that. Yes, so I've gotten to know him. The great Will Rogers came to visit me. After he left, he wrote a kind note saying he wished he could have stayed more than one day there. Too bad we lost him in Wiley Post in that crash in Alaska. I also got to know the president, President Roosevelt. You probably saw that photograph of the two of us. Now, his visit put some joy in the folks here, but I'll tell you whose visit really put some joy in the folks here. That was when the First Lady came. She'd heard about that airman project, and she wanted to see it for herself. She even wanted to go flying with one of the pilots. Now, the Secret Service was kind of not too enamored by that idea, but Mrs. Roosevelt was adamant, and they relented, saying something along the lines of, well, you know how the First Lady is. Old Chief Anderson took Eleanor Roosevelt up flying, and they went flying for about an hour or so. I'll tell you, Mrs. Bethune and I, and you know Mrs. Bethune is very good friends with both the President and the First Lady, we laughed and we laughed about that. She said, that certainly sounds like the Eleanor Roosevelt she knows. I'll tell you, Mrs. Bethune, she might be the most powerful colored lady in America today. Yes. I also have gotten the pleasure to know the wonderful, the great, the esteemed opera singer. What's his name? The really famous opera singer? Yes, Roland Hayes. I got to know Roland Hayes. And he has traveled all around this great country of ours. And he's even been asked to do a command performance at Buckingham Palace. Perhaps, who knows, maybe someday he might be the first Negro to perform at Bayreuth. Maybe he will be, or maybe he won't be. Now, I should say I am not too enamored by the famous people I've had the pleasure of knowing or the awards, but I have been pleased by the fact that my work has started to get some attention. I should say something just a little about the purpose of my work. All of my work has been to help to improve the health and living conditions of the Southern farmer. Again, that's one reason why I have never patented any of my products or discovery for personal gain. I wanted everyone to be able to benefit from what I could create. As I've said many times, the great creator charged me nothing, how can I charge you? Many of the farmers I was dealing with, they had to face poverty, poor nutrition, and prejudice. And to meet this end, I encouraged them to plant personal gardens, both for sustenance, but also for aesthetics and effect. I wanted them to know that if they planted certain things, they might be able to pickle them and save them for the winter. So during the winter, not only could they have more nutritious meals, they could save money too. We then came up with these experiment gardens where we would have these gardens right on the Institute. And we would work with our different types of crops and different types of fertilizers that we were working with. And we would invite the farmers to come to those experiment gardens. Later, we started loading up a wagon with our products and discoveries and traveling around the countryside. Nowadays, they call what we did extension or extension work, as they call that nowadays. Back then, we just called it loading up the wagon and traveling around the countryside. That's what we called it. I'll tell you, the experiment gardens, the wagon, and I should tell you about that wagon that we take around. It's called the Jessup wagon, named after Mr. Morris K. Jessup of New York City, who's funded it. Even though we started with the wagon, the Jessup wagon today is a truck. It certainly is. And I'll tell you, I think that Jessup wagon, those experiment gardens, and even the bulletins that I produced, they all serve one purpose. And that purpose is to help people find ways to live better lives and to find ways to help them help the soil. I want them to help the soil. As I told that paper in Montgomery, whenever the soil is rich, the people flourish. Wherever the soil is wasted, the people are wasted. A poor soil only produces a poor people. I said that because I believe it. We also came up with ways to use the Alabama dirt and the clay and the mud to make paints, because I wanted the farmers to be able to have beauty in their homes. I wanted them to put paintings on the wall. I wanted them to have nice looking houses, because the people, they felt better about their houses when they were painted. You can imagine that, can't you? Can't you imagine that? Of course you can. You would feel better if your house was painted nicely, wouldn't you? Of course you would. And I've known the importance of beauty and painting and art a long time. It all started when I was a little boy growing up in Diamond Grove, Missouri, in southwest Missouri. And I went to visit the home of a friend. And at this home, they had a beautiful painting. And I decided that I wanted to give the Carvers a painting like that. But I was missing something. What do you think I was missing? Paint. Yeah. See, earlier someone said talent. But no, that's exactly, I was missing paint. And I didn't have any money to buy any paint, any paintbrushes, any canvas. So as a little boy, I decided to create my own. I took little twigs and horsehair for the brush, thank you. And for the paints, I took the dirt and the clay and the mud and the berries and mashed them up. And for my canvas, I would find old burlap sacks or old feed sacks that we would get from the store. And that's how I made my first painting for the Carvers. And the Carvers said that was the most beautiful painting they ever received. I don't know if that was true, but that's what they told me. That's what they told me. Now, I haven't said anything much about the Carvers. I should. So as I said, I was born in southwest Missouri. I was born near the end of the War of the Rebellion. I remember I was around 12 or so years of age when I finally found out what had happened to my mama. I'd earlier found out that my papa had been killed in a farm accident shortly before my own birth. But I didn't know anything about my mama. My older brother, Jim, he said it seemed as if one day she was there, and then the next day she was not there. We didn't know what had happened to her until one day, Uncle Moses, that's Moses Carver, we called him Uncle Moses, he called us to the front porch and told us what happened. He said it was in the waning days of the War of the Rebellion, and he'd heard a story about all of these marauders that were traveling around the countryside and robbing folks. And if they couldn't find any gold or silver to steal, they would take the next best thing, and that was the folks, so that they could resell those folks. And Uncle Moses said he was in his field working as usual, and he heard all those horses coming up the path. And he knew right away, he said, that it was too many horses to be a friendly bunch. So as he was rabbing towards his cabin to get his gun, Those outlaws, they roped him like he was cattle. They drug him around for a bit. They tied him up by his thumbs, and they burned the soles of his feet so he could not follow after them. And they made him watch as they rode away with me, just a baby, in my mama's arms. They took my mama and they took me. My brother Jim was spared because he went out and hid near the creek when he heard the horses coming up the path. After they rode away with us, Aunt Susan Carver, she came out, she untied Uncle Moses, and they sent to town for help. They hired a man by the name of Mr. Jim Bentley to go after us and find us. Mr. Bentley had been a tracker in the early days of the war, and they figured if anybody could find us, it was him. Mr. Bentley was gone for several weeks, and after he returned with only me, he explained to the Carvers how he looked far and wide for me and my mama, but that he was only able to find me, and that was all the way down in northwest Arkansas. For returning with me, Mr. Bentley was given a fine racehorse valued at over $300. I later told Uncle Moses that I thought that was $300 well spent. So I was sickly as a child and wasn't much help in the fields, so I helped my Aunt Sue out around the house. From her, I learned to cook, to clean, to sew and wash dishes. All things that would hold me in good stead as I grew older. I also would start to help her out in her garden. And after a while, it seems as if the little plants seemed to thrive underneath my touch. And I would often weep when I would break a stem or a flower or a plant, and it hurt me so. I called them my little floral beauties. That's what I called my little plants in my little garden. I called them my floral beauties. Yes. And so after a while, word got out that I had a way with plants and flowers. Aunt Sue saw how good I was, and she had me helping her out in her garden, and then her friends heard, and other folks heard, and before too long, I was helping all of the area out with their gardens. And before long, do you know what they called me? They called me the plant doctor. I was probably no more than 8 or so years of age, and they called me the plant doctor. Now, during the week, or on Sundays, my brother Jim and I, we would go to the church, and during the week, our friends would go to that same building, and they would learn how to read and to write. But I wasn't allowed to go, and Jim wasn't allowed to go, for reasons I could not understand then, reasons that I find criminal now. So I told my Aunt Sue that I wanted to learn how to read and to write. And do you know what she did? Well, earlier someone said they guess she beat me. No, she didn't beat me. She taught me. She taught me how to read. And she didn't have to do it, but she did. And for that, I'm eternally grateful. I learned so much growing up on the Carver homestead. I really enjoyed my childhood. But after a while, I decided I wanted to learn more. I wanted to see the world. And other than really teaching me how to read, there wasn't too much more I could do on the Carver homestead. I'd heard there was a colored school 12 miles away in the town of Neosho, Missouri. So I talked it over with my brother Jim, talked it over with the Carvers, and early on a Sunday morning, I got a ham sandwich, some corn dodgers, and I gathered up my 10 favorite rocks, and I walked to Neosho. Now, the walk to Neosho was somewhat long, and it was kind of tiring, and I ate my ham sandwich and my corn dodgers, and it was a bit of a journey for a little boy as young as I was then. But by the time I got to Neosho, I no longer had 10 favorite rocks. I had 12 favorite rocks. And in Neosho, that's where it happened. I don't know how it happened. I just know it happened. That's where I met my new Aunt Mariah and my new Uncle Andrew, the Watkinses. They weren't expecting me. They didn't even know me. But they just happened to live right next door to the school and saw an opportunity to help. They told me if I worked hard in school and helped out around the house, I could live with them. That's what I did. And I learned a lot in the process. Aunt Mariah, she was a midwife and watched other folks' kids. Uncle Andy, he did odd jobs around town. Some would say they had very little, but they gave me so much. Aunt Mariah, she said, stand up and be proud of yourself. Your name is no longer Carver's George. You're George Carver. You're a person, not a slave. And she showed me how I could use different wild plants and fruits and berries as medicines. And she said, never forget, everything that you can need, you can find in nature. And she also, she told me to make sure that once I got my book learning, that I shared it with others. She said, George, you must always remember to lift as you climb. You must always remember to lift as you climb. And Aunt Mariah, who lived most of her life under slavery, she also told me to make sure I used my freedom. She said, George, use your freedom. Use your freedom. And she said for her, that sometimes meant singing when her spirit told her she should sing. Something that she said she wasn't always able to do, but she told me that. I lived with the Watkinses about a year when I found that my own education had just about matched that of the teachers, and so I decided I would travel alone. Fortunately, there was a school in Fort Scott, Kansas, so I went and saw the Carvers, talked to my brother Jim about it, and all of the folks in the Yo Show put money together to send me on my way to Fort Scott. When I was in Fort Scott, Kansas, I saw a man lynched. As young as I was, the horror haunted me and does even now. I left Fort Scott, Kansas that very night. And from Fort Scott, Kansas, I traveled on to Minneapolis, Kansas. Do you know what happened to me in Minneapolis, Kansas? But I'll tell you. I finished school, but I also got a middle name. Yeah, I got a middle name in Minneapolis. You see, there were 2 George Carvers living in town, and folks were starting to get us mixed up with our mail and such, so I decided to start using a W as my middle initial to differentiate us. One day, a friend asked if the W stood for Washington. I jokingly replied, yes, and the name stuck. And the name stuck. Now, after finishing school there in Minneapolis, Kansas, I decided I would attend college. There was a goal of mine. I wanted to learn all I could. So I applied to attend Highland College in Highland, Kansas. You can imagine my excitement when I received my acceptance papers in the mail. I got a ride on the back of a wagon, and I remember getting into town, and I remember jumping off the back of that wagon and running into that administration building, and I remember presenting my paperwork. I said, hello, I'm George W. Carver, here to enroll. Here are my papers. I thought the gentleman had not heard me, so I repeated myself. And the gentleman took the papers, looking somewhat confused, and as he looked at those papers, he said, well, sorry, son. The school must have not have known you were colored, because we don't allow colored students. Now, how do you think that made me feel? How do you think it made me feel? Awful. Disappointed. Mad, yes. I felt each of these things, but then I remembered that in each of our lives, we'll have to face setbacks. And do you know what a setback is? I'll tell you what a setback is. A setback is a setup for a comeback. That's what a setback is. And I told myself if I had to leave that town to find a school that would accept me, that's what I would do, and that's what I did. But first, of course, I needed to make some money. I'd spent all my money trying to get out there. So I started working for this family. And then after a while, I learned that they were going to head further west and try their hand at homesteading. So I decided I would do the same. I staked my claim and put my money down. And that year, for the next 3 years or so, there was nothing but drought. So I wasn't able to prove up my claim. And I decided I would give up the homesteading idea. So I traveled back to Kansas City, Missouri. I moved to Kansas City. I took some typing courses there. And then I also got a job at the train station, the old depot. I watched the trains come in. I watched the trains go out. I said, one of these days, I'm going to get on one of those trains. And I did. And for reason failing memory, I got off of that train in Winterset, Iowa. I don't remember why I got off that train there, but that's where I got off the train. The year was 1888. Remembering some advice my Aunt Mariah Watkins gave me about going to church, I settled on the Winterset Baptist Church. There, I was singing in a choir, and one day this gentleman came up to me afterwards and said, my wife told me we must invite you to lunch. And it was John and Susan Milholland were their names. And Mrs. Milholland heard me singing in the choir, and she sent her husband over. And I started going over to their lunch several times. They helped me get a job. I got a job at the Schultz Hotel. I started a little business for myself also, taking in laundry. And after several visits, I told them of what had happened at Highland College. And after expressing their disappointment, they told me about a school that they thought just might accept me. They told me about Simpson College. As it turns out, Simpson had been started by the Methodist Church and had an open door policy. In fact, it was even named after the Reverend Matthew Simpson, who gave a eulogy at President Abraham Lincoln's funeral in Springfield, Illinois. It was 1890 when I went to Indianola. Now, do you know what I studied at Simpson College? Art. I studied art. I studied art and music, and I acted in a play. I tell you, the people there at Simpson College made me feel as if I was a real human being. That's what they made me feel. And there was many wonderful people, and I must especially mention the Listons, Sophia and William Liston. They had a bookstore right off the square. They saw the little shack I was living in, and they invited me to study at their bookstore and at their home, just so I could get out of my shack a little bit. And the students there, my fellow students, were so wonderful. They saw I didn't have much furniture, and so one day I came home to my little shack, and there were some new chairs, well, new to me chairs, there. And I was so moved and inspired by that. They would often sometimes slide concert tickets underneath my door. I thought that I could stay at Simpson forever. I really was enjoying my time there. I was learning. Things were good. Until one day, my art teacher, Miss Etta Budd, she called me into her office, and she told me she thought I should leave. That was my response. But she explained that it would be tough for me to make a living for myself as a painter, as an artist. And she said that she could tell from my drawings, as well as from the little garden I had out by my shack, that I had a way with plants and flowers. So she proposed and suggested that I leave Indianola and go to Ames, to the Iowa Agricultural College, where her father was on the faculty. It was 1891 when I arrived in Ames, and as I was the first Negro student there, they didn't exactly know what to do with me. I wasn't given a room near the other students. I wasn't allowed to eat with the other students. In fact, I had to eat with all of the other hired hands and hired help and all the workers. And after a while, from interaction came understanding and acceptance. When my professor, Louis Pamel, heard I didn't have a room, he said, "Bring him to me. I have a room for him." And he gave me one of his laboratories to live in. When Mrs. Liston in Indianola heard about my dining situation, she put on a fine hat, got on the train, and came up to Ames. She walked around with me and insisted that she would eat with me wherever I had to eat. And before long, the powers that be decided I could eat with the other students. And before too long, I had a full table wherever I sat. I helped out with the football team. I wrote for the student yearbook. I even joined the campus military regiment where I achieved the rank of captain, though I say there's no need to call me Captain Carver. No need to call me Captain Carver. And I would also go on nature walks with a little boy who reminded me a lot of myself when I was his age. I could tell that even at that young age, he had a love of nature and a curiosity that told me he was going to be successful no matter what he chose to do later in life. Do you know what I call that little boy today? I call him Mr. Vice President. That little boy is the current U.S. Vice President, Henry A. Wallace. Now, I will admit, I was surprised when President Roosevelt ran for and won that third term last year, weren't you? It's never been done before. Remember some of the things they were saying? First term good, second term good enough, third term good for nothing. And what was the other thing they were saying? I remember, 2 good terms deserves a parole. But nonetheless, I am pleased that President Roosevelt ran for and won that third term, and that he selected my friend Henry A. Wallace to be vice president. Prior to being vice president, young Henry served as Secretary of Agriculture, as had his father. I'll tell you, we still correspond today, me and the vice president. He truly, truly is a fine ambassador. He's a fine ambassador. As you may know, when he was named vice president-elect, President Roosevelt sent him to Mexico to attend the inauguration of Mexico's president. Since that time, he's been working with Mexican farmers ever since. He truly is a fine inspiration, and it is truly an honor of mine that I've known him so long. And I will also say, with some amount of modesty, he did call me the kindliest, most patient teacher he ever knew. He called me the kindliest, most patient teacher he ever knew. Now, in 1894, I received my bachelor's degree. I had to write a thesis. My thesis was entitled, Plants as Modified by Man. It was at this time that I was elected to the faculty, and they put me in charge of the greenhouse. And since that time, nearly every day since 1894 or so, I've worn a flower in my lapel or in my pocket up here. I really believe it says something about being connected to nature in this most concrete way. I really believe that. In 1896, I received my master's degree. It was in that year that I answered Booker T. Washington's call to join him at the Tuskegee Institute. Now, before I go, I was going to show you a letter, but I don't think I brought it out here. It's an interesting letter that whenever I have visitors, some folks, they like to ask about a number of these letters, but this one, many folks have asked about this one. It's a letter I got from 1935 and from Richard B. Gregg. And the letter, he's reaching out to me because he is good friends with this gentleman in India. And this gentleman in India has heard about all of my work dealing with the Southern farmers. And this gentleman, he's trying to work with many of the poor people in his own community, in his own nation, trying to bring back some of their indigenous industries. And so Mr. Gregg asked me if I could send him some of my bulletins. And he said, he said, Mr. Gandhi has heard of your work and would so much like to communicate with you. And he even sent me Gandhi's address. And he even pointed out in his letter that peanuts were cultivated extensively in India. Did you know that? Did you know that? No. I didn't know it either. But no, actually I did know it. I did know it. But I was pleased that he told me that in the letter. And since that time, I have exchanged many, many letters with the great Mahatma. I really believe in what he's doing to bring freedom and prosperity to his native land. And it is my great privilege and honor to be able to correspond with such a great person as the great Mahatma Gandhi. It truly is. Now, earlier you asked me what makes me happy. I can say when I receive a letter from Mahatma Gandhi, that makes me happy. It really does, because it lets me know that the work that I'm doing, that he's doing, that many of us are doing, we're really working and doing the work to make things become better for many. Another thing that makes me happy is commencement. I was so surprised at how happy I was last year at graduation time. It really struck me when we were singing the Tuskegee song, especially the last two verses. When we were singing the last two verses, when I thought about all that I have seen, all that I've been allowed to see, all that I've been allowed to do and take part in, I was just overcome with joy. And I don't know if you know those two verses, but they go, "Thy hand we have held up the difficult steeps, when painful and slow was the pace. And onward and upward we've labored with thee, for the glory of God in our race. The field smiled to greet us, the forest the glad, the ring of the anvil and hoe bring up music as thrilling, as sweet as a harp, as thou hast taught us to hear and to know. O Mother Tuskegee, thou shinest today as a gem in the fairest of land. Thou gave us the heaven-blessed power to see the worth in our minds and our hands. We thank thee, we bless thee, we pray for the years, encouraging for all to impart. Full fruit for thy striving, time longer to strive, sweet love and true labor's reward." When we were singing that song and I was looking out onto the students, I was so moved. I saw them with their kinfolk, many of those kinfolk who were of my age and who came up of a time when we could only imagine days like that. And I should say, do you know who wrote that, the Tuskegee song? Well, I'll tell you, the great poet, Paul Laurence Dunbar, the great poet. And I knew Paul. Paul actually came to campus 40-some odd years ago. It's a pity we lost him at such a young age. It really is a pity. Now, I could never be a poet like Mr. Dunbar, like Paul Laurence Dunbar. But I remember when my world was opening up to me, when I too was a student, thinking about seeing those students at the commencement, I thought about my own time as a student. And I remembered how as my world was opening up to me, I believed I could do anything. I wanted to act in a play at Simpson, so I did. I wanted to write for the yearbook, so I did. I wanted to write a poem, so I did. It was no Paul Laurence Dunbar poem, but in 1894, I wrote a poem called "The Legend of the Gourd." It was selected as the class poem. I don't remember any of the words from that poem today, but when I remember that poem and I remember that time in my life, I think about how the entire world was opening up to me. I remember feeling loved and inspired and encouraged. I remember thinking how Iowa showed me and welcomed me that anything was possible if I put my heart and mind to it. Those folks there in Iowa, they didn't know that I would come here to Tuskegee and do this work. They did not know that I would become a famous scientist. They didn't know that the great and powerful of the world would consult with me for my advice. They didn't know that Time magazine would call me the Black Leonardo. They didn't know any of these things. All they knew was that I was a person, and that because I was a person, I had worth. So simple, but means so much. So simple, but means so much. Because of all of the kindness that was shown me in Iowa, and because of what I learned from the Carvers and Aunt Mariah Watkins and Uncle Andy Watkins and all the others, I've tried to be of service. As I've said many times, it is not the style of clothes one wears, nor the amount of money one has in the bank, nor the type of automobile one drives that counts. These mean nothing. It is simply service that measures success. And because of all of what was shown and given to me, I've tried to be of service. And I've tried to, in Aunt Mariah's words, to use my freedom. Sometimes, even when it's as simple as singing when my spirit tells me to sing. Oh, what do I like to sing, you say? I will tell you, but only if you sing it with me. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. When I think of Iowa, I'm gonna let it shine. When I think of Iowa, I'm gonna let it shine. When I think of Iowa, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. When I do my work, I'm gonna let it shine. When I do my work, I'm gonna let it shine. When I do my work, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.
If Dr. Carver hasn't left the house, Paxton, come on back in here and get another round of applause. Come on. Come stand next to George. Wasn't that great? Just remarkable. Really inspiring and fun and interesting and informative and educational, and I'm sure everybody here learned something new about Dr. Carver that you didn't know before. Really great. Paxton, thank you. Thank you so much. Inspiring words, inspiring performance, and you all got to sing too. Nothing better than that. Joining us tonight, we also have colleagues from institutions forever linked with Iowa State as part of the Carver legacy. We have Tuskegee University representatives here and from Simpson College, and we will forever be part of the same story, and we are so proud to be. I'll introduce both individuals, one from each institution, to come forward and speak, and we'll start with Dr. Rolandis Rice, Chief Operating Officer and Vice President for Student Affairs at Tuskegee. Rolandis, please come forward. Dr. Rice has a wealth of experience in leadership, many roles in higher education. He's also an expert on 20th century history and specifically the modern civil rights movement. And when I asked him what else I should say about him, he said, "Tell them I'm a family man." And that's a wonderful thing. We are thrilled to have him here with us to further this linkage between our institutions to celebrate George Washington Carver. Rolandis, please come forward.
Good evening. I have the most unenviable position on the program tonight, following Carver himself. But I do bring you greetings in behalf of our 9th president, Dr. Charlotte Patterson Morris, and the entire Tuskegee University family. Let me also acknowledge President Winterstein and her amazing cabinet, particularly VP Toya Younger and her staff for spending most of the day with me. Dean Robeson, Dr. Grooms. I'm terrified of dogs, but he took me through the vet school today, so I am eternally in your debt. There's an old adage that says you tell so much about a school by not only who it honors, but who it produces. For it was you, Iowa State, who found Carver and our 3rd president, Frederick Douglass Patterson. You found them brick and made them marble. I am now going to petition my grandmother to allow me to sit at the grown-up table during Thanksgiving because my name is being mentioned in the same sentence as Dr. Ruby Perry, Dean of Tuskegee University's College of Veterinary Medicine, and Dr. Olga Bolden-Tiller, Dean of the College of Agriculture, Environment, and Nutrition Sciences. I was honored to be their chauffeur and carry their bags. Dr. Cooper, I certainly want to acknowledge you for you being such a generous host to us. I will certainly come back just to be in your presence. Thank you. As Dr. Carver walked down the aisle, he sang a verse that was very reminiscent to me, because I am the son, grandson, and great-grandson of Baptist preachers. So because of that, I find myself threading scriptural references to historical occurrences and figures. Tonight is no different. I can think of only 2 documented examples of someone creating something from dirt. According to Genesis 2:7, the Almighty took a few pounds of mud and several pints of blood and made man. The other used a few pounds of clay and made wood stainer, makeup, and paint by using what Carver called chemical gymnastics. In other words, his innovation speaks to the divinity or divinely inspired genius of George Washington Carver. In full disclosure, as you can tell, I sometimes confuse the pulpit for the lecture hall. So I hope that you all will permit me to stay in the Old Testament for just a little while longer, as only the panoramic eyes of providence could have seen a George Washington Carver do all that he did for humanity. Now, he mentioned, Carver did, that he had an uncle named Moses. But there is another parallel to the biblical Moses. And in some respects, Joseph. He was born a slave, abandoned, and in this case, bartered for a horse worth $300. Moses had a speech impediment, but spoke directly to God and the Pharaoh of the Exodus. According to Carver himself, he did not or could not or speak very much until he was 19. Those are his words. The latter perhaps was more impressive because he spoke to objects that could not speak back. But due to what I call cosmic or celestial chemistry, he seemed to interpret the inaudible language of the plant, which he referred to as God's silent messenger. But he also had a telepathic connection to the potato and the peanut. One author wisely observed that the peanut was akin to Aladdin's lamp, yielding whatever Carver asked of it. Booker T. Washington, our first president, was also a genius by all standards of measurement. It was him who wrote Carver to come to Tuskegee and Carver's salary was $125 per month, much lower than what he earned at this great haven and beacon of learning here at Iowa State University. But this is what I learned. When Carver died, there were still paychecks in his room that he had not cashed. I don't know about you, but I don't have any paychecks that I have not cashed. So Carver starts October 8th, 1896, 5 months after the Supreme Court ruled in Plessy versus Ferguson that racial segregation, which soon penetrated every aspect of Southern life and law, was not in violation of the 14th Amendment. But it was Carver. Defied so many, if not most, of the pseudoscience associated with people of African descent. I found an article from October 29th, 1929, which was striking in its substance and in defiance of Alabama norms. The associate editor of the Montgomery Advertiser penned this article 2 months after the crash of the stock market and the onset of the Great Depression. The title of the article in the Montgomery Advertiser, Mr. Ambassador, was "The Negro Genius Shows Way Out for Farmers." Carver was described in this article as the distinguished Negro scientist and that he was as great of a genius in his field as Edison. The author continued this way: the soundness of his science could have earned him a post even at Oxford and Cambridge. As I close, it is appropriate that I conclude with another biblical reference as I look at the desk to my right. I must mention that Carver, similar to the prophet Elijah, left all of us a double portion, particularly the students at Tuskegee University. We have in the Tuskegee University archives Carver's writing desk. So moving forward, after seeing this desk, I'm going to ensure that every single student who comes into Tuskegee University touches this desk during new student orientation, for they need to know that they too can touch a piece of the genius that was recognized and cultivated by Iowa State University. So as I take my seat, I'm reminded of a saying that's in the main administrative building that is on the wall. I think it says, cultivate, create, and innovate. Tuskegee University will join you as we continue to collaborate, cultivate, and innovate. Thank you so much for having us here at Iowa State University.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Dr. Rice. Wow, you are being treated to some extraordinary speakers, and we have only just begun, and the ice cream is waiting for us. Our next speaker is familiar with this room and the Carver legacy, and that is Jay Byers, who is president of Simpson College, formerly the CEO of the Greater Des Moines Partnership. Jay, please come forward. Jay has done remarkable work here in Iowa, building our economy and our ability to thrive and prosper. He's now serving as president of this extraordinary college down the road, where Carver was first accepted, and it was with their recommendation that Iowa State took Carver in. And so there's a butterfly effect here that's so important to us all. Jay Byers was a key contributor, along with Ambassador Quinn and Simon Estes and President Winterstein and a group of others, to establish Carver Day on February 1st here in Iowa. Please welcome him to the podium to speak from Simpson College perspective.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you, Dr. Robeson, and for your warm welcome and introduction. And a very good evening to all of you who are gathered here today. I am very grateful to be here with all of you this evening. big congratulations and thank you to everyone here at Iowa State who had such a big hand in creating this inspirational event. There's actually a lot that Simpson College and Iowa State have in common, right? We have the same colors, right? Iowa State, Cyclones, Simpson, Storm, right? And of course, the amazing common legacy of George Washington Carver. It's also great to have our friends from Tuskegee University who are here this evening. I had the opportunity to visit Tuskegee for the first time this last summer on my way to visit my daughter in Georgia, so it's wonderful to have you here in our great state. And it is truly a privilege for me to be here tonight to represent Simpson College. I've been president now for 6 months, and this is a very special occasion. I am actually an alum of Simpson College, and I'm very familiar with the George Washington Carver legacy and very proud of that. And especially as we're here tonight to celebrate the incredible life and legacy of this great man. And what a treat it is to share this great program featuring such an impressive lineup of distinguished speakers and presenters. I can tell you that there is the same level of excitement on Simpson's campus right now, today, as we began our 3-day George Washington Carver Day celebration in partnership with our friends in the Indianola community. As we've been reminded in creatively powerful ways on our 2 campuses today, Dr. Carver was a uniquely gifted man of remarkable character, intelligence, and ingenuity, a leader in transforming both science and society. Simpson College had the great fortune, as you learned earlier, of welcoming Dr. Carver as a student in 1890, where some people are surprised that he came to study art and piano for a year before moving on to Iowa State, as of course you've learned more about this evening. But I am going to read for you a excerpt out of the history of Simpson College, which is called Beneath the Whispering Maples. It was written by Joe Walt. And if you just, and this I think will really sort of fill in some of the additional details of what you learned from Dr. Carver this evening. So maybe just even close your eyes and think about this is the experience when George Washington Carver first stepped foot on Simpson campus. Okay. On a sunny Tuesday morning in September of 1890, what looked for all the world like a small army of students descended on the college to register for fall classes. Returning students greeted each other cheerfully as they waited to sign up with the registrar. The process was relatively simple, for there were few choices in the curriculum, whether academy or college. We had a high school academy at the time too, but it required the better part of the day to finish. For older students, registration day was one of great joyous reunion, and they walked about the campus with that easy confidence that comes from knowing their way around. New students, on the other hand, appeared to be a bit less at ease, apprehensive about what awaited them here. Some of them felt terribly alone. One of them was especially anxious, for he had arrived on campus that day utterly without introduction to or prior communication with the college. As he finally reached the head of the line, he stood silently and expectantly, ramrod straight, every muscle in his body tense. The registrar looked up at him with an expression of astonishment mingled with mystification, for he beheld a tall, black young man whose countenance reflected the fear in his heart. He was George Washington Carver. He announced in his high-pitched voice and that he had come here to enroll at Simpson College. He presented his credentials, waited for a few frightening moments as the registrar and President Holmes examined his high school record. He could scarcely believe when Dr. Holmes broke into a hearty smile, reached out to shake his hand and said, "Welcome to Simpson." The next piece I'm going to read real quickly here is how, and you heard a little bit about this earlier as well, how George Washington Carver decided to transfer from Simpson to Iowa State. When George Washington Carver persuaded Etta Budd to permit him to paint still life, especially flowers, he was truly happy. He could bring to life again any flower he had once seen from bud to full bloom and started at once on the yucca of the plains, which he remembered from his desert days in western Kansas. Miss Budd was delighted with Carver's progress in art. He was surely her best student, for, as she put it, painting is in him. Yet she was troubled. What future could there be for Carver as a painter? The more she thought about it, the more she noticed that Carver was fascinated not only with painting plants and flowers, he loved them and nurtured them in their very natural state. Why should he not perhaps study much more for himself and his race in science? Therefore, she urged Carver to leave Simpson to transfer to Iowa State, the agricultural college at Ames, where her father, Dr. Joseph Lancaster Budd, was a professor in horticulture. Her logic was persuasive, and Carver did leave Simpson in 1891 to study agriculture science here in Ames. But the parting was difficult. It would have been much easier to remain in the comfortable security and warmth of Simpson College. That college was paradise for me, he said many years later. He arranged to finish up his spring course ahead of time, and for the school year at Iowa State began in the spring of that year. He packed up his few belongings and prepared once again to face an uncertain but potentially promising future. And Dr. Carver went on later to say, at Simpson College, there were the kind of people there that made me believe that I was a human being. While Simpson would like to take pride in opening educational doors for Dr. Carver, it was really Dr. Carver who opened the eyes, hearts, and minds of the Simpson College community. He laid the foundation for our ongoing journey as a leader in pursuing racial equality in higher education. We still have a long way to go in that work, all of us, but the legacy, the legendary legacy of Dr. Carver will forever be an inspiring source of motivation as we press forward with renewed resolve. On campus, our Carver Science Building serves as a daily reminder of his profound life and impact on all of us. Indeed, Dr. Carver is so much more than a bright light in the history of Simpson College. He is that guiding beacon that calls us to pursue innovation, excellence, and integrity in our ongoing efforts to transform students, to transform the world. Thank you again for your time and the honor to share this special occasion with each of you. Have a great night.
Thank you, President Byers. On behalf of Iowa State University, we encourage you to have students transfer here anytime you like.
For graduate school, anytime.
Yes. Please finish them first at Simpson, and then we'll take them on. What great remarks. Thank you so much. Our next speaker is Ambassador Ken Quinn. Please come forward. Yeah. Ambassador Kenneth Quinn is a remarkable man, a great Iowan, and indeed a world citizen. He is President Emeritus of the World Food Prize Foundation, currently serves as Special Advisor to Ambassador Branstad at the World Food Prize Foundation. He's co-chair of the Carver Recognition Committee along with Simon Estes, which led to the establishment of Iowa's Carver Day, which happens every year on February 1st, as you know. And he has done so much more. Just today, over the lunch hour, I was in the World Food Prize Hall of Laureates, and upstairs I went into the Iowa Gallery, and there is a statue, a bust of Ambassador Quinn, and it says, diplomat, warrior, and humanitarian, and I would add today, agriculturalist.
Wow. Well, there can't be a much better honor at Iowa State for someone to refer to a political science major. Thank you very much, Dean Robeson, for the wonderful, very kind introduction. At the Hall of Laureates, and Dr. Rice, I hope you and the other Delegates who are here can come down and visit the Hall of Laureates tomorrow. Because down there is a painting of George Washington Carver and Mahatma Gandhi. And that painting led to my being invited to go to Tuskegee in 2014 and deliver the keynote address at the PAWS conference, the annual conference which is built around the idea of informing extension workers who would go out all across the South and do and spread the great work that George Washington Carver and the other scientists there have been performing and bringing together and spreading, carrying out the mission. And I remember going there in 2014 because it was right after we had unveiled a statue of Norman Borlaug in the US Capitol. And his statue is right next to Rosa Parks, who's from Tuskegee. And I remember going to Tuskegee after seeing Borlaug's statue right next to Rosa Parks and thinking of the many similarities of these two individuals, were common people who had risen to such great heights in achievement in America. And I went past Booker T. Washington's house and then to there to have the ceremony at which I presented this painting. Here are, as you heard Carver himself earlier, talking about the letters that were written between Carver and Mahatma Gandhi as he was struggling, Gandhi was struggling to throw off British colonial rule and worried because he was a vegetarian that he wouldn't be strong enough. He looked to George Washington Carver as the one person who could help him fortify his diet. And just imagine that today, the reality, you don't have to imagine, the reality that there are over 1 billion people who live in freedom and democracy. Because a man who had studied at Iowa State and then made his life at Tuskegee played a small but not insignificant part in that incredible achievement. And it was my great honor to have Dean Walter Hill, please convey my warmest regards to Dean Hill, to come and present a copy of that painting that I had commissioned. But what I want to share with you particularly is that I would never have known, and no one in Iowa would know that story, except for Paxton Williams, who told me that story in 2005 when we had a World Food Prize laureate from India, and told me about those letters, and he got me copies from Tuskegee, from your archive. And so it could tell that story and spread that story across our state. And I refer to Paxton Williams, who was an intern at the World Food Prize as a young man, as the George Washington Carver evangelist. And I say, as with all the sincerity that I can muster here, there would not be a George Washington Carver Day in Iowa except for all of the work that Paxton Williams did. I want to thank President Winterstein, Robert Wagner, if you'd be so good to send her, my wife, lay sons, and my warmest greetings, Dean Robeson, the Dr. Jeff Johnson, who's here, the head of the Alumni Association, who this year gave me one of the great honors of my life, made me an honorary alumnus of Iowa State. Thank you. I have an honorary degree from Simpson as well. And I get letters from both asking me to contribute each year to, so, and but having this the wonderful event here to be part of that, I want to thank Governor Reynolds and the state legislature on behalf of Simon Estes and I, and all the members of our group and the more than 100 organizations that we recruited. Distinguished Iowans, Iowan groups, civic clubs, religious institutions, everyone got behind this idea. And that began, a day of recognition. The idea began, though, in May of 2020. And it came from the terrible murder of George Floyd and how it rent our country. And Simon Estes and I are both Iowa Medal recipients and great friends. And we talked and said, maybe there's a way to begin healing by honoring another man named George. And we co-authored an op-ed in the Des Moines Register and began talking about this idea and gathering others to be with us in this endeavor. And it took 2 years, but the state legislature voted unanimously for this for only the third time in our state's history to honor an individual with a day of recognition. Herbert Hoover, Norman Borlaug, now George Washington Carver. And being here a year ago in this same room for the inaugural commemoration of that event will always be indelibly etched in my memory. And I hope we chose the date of February 1st so it would be at the beginning of Black History Month and could lead to further understanding and learning, like the things we've learned tonight. Now, I want to take a moment as an Iowa State alumnus and reflect on that long period that it takes and the incredible difficulty of ever having a day of recognition enacted, to say, as an Iowa State honorary alumnus, that if the San Francisco 49ers win the Super Bowl, getting a day of recognition for Brock Purdy will probably be the fastest process ever achieved. Now, I don't know if you folks from Tuskegee understand that Brock Purdy was the quarterback of the Iowa State football team. But he also was very improbably in this because he was the very last person chosen in the National Football League draft. And to kind of put down the person who's the last one chosen, they get a title. It's called Mr. Irrelevant. Mr. Irrelevant. So it made me think that I can't help but wonder if when George Washington Carver came here to Ames, only the first black student ever accepted, not even allowed to eat with the other students at the beginning, whether he maybe thought of himself, maybe Mr. Irrelevant, and that those other students and others may have thought of him as Mr. Irrelevant. But he, through all of his achievements and perseverance, did these amazing things and showed just how absolutely relevant he was. Now, the football connection continues on this, because maybe you noticed Paxton Williams mentioned Carver's connection to the Iowa State football program. There were so many other things, probably hard to pick up. He became the team manager. And during those years when he was the team manager, for the first time ever, Iowa State defeated the University of Iowa on the football field. This might keep him, Brock Purdy, getting his day of recognition here. But Carver, and, you know, the football connection continues with the fact that the football stadium, when you came by, is named for Jack Trice, African-American football player who died from injuries inflicted on the football field by an all-white team who were upset about playing against him. The only Division I football stadium named for an African-American, for a black athlete. But why was Jack Trice, who's from Ohio, at Iowa State University? He was here because he wanted to study about agriculture and agricultural extension, and then to go to the South and work on and carry out and carry forward the very same things and same activities and have the same achievements as George Washington Carver. And so there's much to be learned and taken away from these connections. But I leave you one last one. You know that Carver was born in the 1860s. And remember that was in 1862, July the 2nd, that the Morrill Act was signed by Abraham Lincoln, which created the land-grant university system. And on September 11th of 1862, Iowa State University became the very first institution to accept being part of the land-grant system. And on January 1st, 1863, Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation. And those two events, 161 so years ago, brought George Washington Carver, enabled him to come here. And now, here in 2024, honoring his legacy with our Iowa's Day of Recognition. Not completing that process, but remembering it as an inspiration that there is still more to do, and with George Washington Carver's legacy will lead us on to that. It's an incredible honor for me to have worked on this with Simon Estes, one of the great heroes of our state, and with all of you who were here, who were part of it. And I'm enormously grateful for all that we did together to honor George Washington Carver. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Quinn. Remarkable comments and stories to tell to link us with Carver and Carver to others. And we have one more speaker, one more fine speaker. Simon Estes, please come forward. Yeah. I want to welcome Simon Estes as a renowned opera standout, a person who has entertained around the world. He is the F. Wendell Miller Distinguished Artist in Residence here at Iowa State University in our Department of Music and Theater. He is a treasure on this campus, a person whose spirit embodies what Dr. Carver's spirit embodied. Simon Estes has filled the mind and the soul and the body of literally millions of people with his music, and this evening he'll fill our minds and souls and bodies with his words.
Thank you very much. It is indeed an honor to be here tonight, again, 1 year from last year, to honor this great man. When I think of George Washington Carver, I think of Abraham Lincoln. They were both very humble individuals. One was quite tall, the other was not so tall, but they were equal in their love for people, for fairness, for education, science, and I think it's a deep, deep honor for me personally to have a building was named after me just recently. It's called Simon Estes Music Hall, but it's right next to George Washington Carver's building called Carver Hall. As I heard earlier this evening about the Bible, and of course the first profession that God created was agriculture. And he told Adam to take care of the garden. And we know that gardens produce food, but yet and still some people on this planet don't have enough food to eat or clean water to drink, especially children. But what this man did years ago has certainly helped, the same way Norman Borlaug did. I had the honor of having sung for Norman Borlaug, who helped feed billions of people around the world. I've been deeply honored in having sung for 8 Nobel Prize laureate people who received that award. But the most important award that I've received is the one that my mother and father gave to me. My grandfather was a slave, sold for $500. I have documentations and pictures of my grandfather. And my father couldn't read or write. But he said to me, son, and to my 3 older sisters, you must get an education. And education is a way that would continue to reduce and eradicate racism in the world today. We have to have, as I said the last time, speaking about this great man, we've got to do it with love and education and understanding and strength and courage. To think this man, who was not very tall in his stature, but he's a giant with what he contributed to Simpson College and to Iowa State University. The new president of Simpson College, I want to thank you. I received 2 George Washington Carver awards from Simpson College. And I have something in common with George Washington Carver, having come to Iowa State University in 1891. And 1891 was the year my father was born. And I always kind of think of that. As I said, my father, he really couldn't read or write. He was taken out of school in the 3rd reader. In those days, many of the African American schools, Negro schools, black schools were called readers and not grades. And my father was taken out of the third reader, so he didn't ever get a chance to get a proper education. But he lived a great example before my three sisters. He was a great husband to my mother, and I'm grateful that both of my parents taught me the value of faith and education. Ambassador Ken Quinn called me 4 years ago and mentioned the possibility of doing something in honor of this great man. And Ambassador Quinn, who just spoke, he's a little bit lighter than George Washington Carver, but neither of them saw color. They saw love, they saw a need, they saw education, and they realized that we all are of one race, the human race. And as the young man mentioned, God gave talents and gifts to all of us. Many people never recognize the gift that God has given them in a lifetime. And so they have to get a job in order to survive. But George Washington Carver, God gave more than one talent and more than one gift to. And so we all need to realize that we're put on this earth to serve the Lord and to serve one another. God made us different colors to test the quality of our characters. Can we love someone if they look different visually from the way we look? There's only one race, and that's the human race. We're different because of climate, geography, and diet. And I won't take time to elaborate on all of that, but God did everything just right. And so we still, human beings, need to realize that He is the creator of all. And He doesn't like it when we don't love one another. We think of the 10 Commandments. And in the New Testament, when the 10 Commandments were spoken by Jesus, were the same way that God gave them to Moses. And then someone asked Jesus, what is the greatest commandment? And Jesus said, to love the Lord your God with all of your heart, your soul, your mind, and your strength. And He said the second one is like the first one, and that is love your neighbor as yourself. And George Washington Carver was loved by the people of Iowa. They gave him his opportunity at Simpson College and at Iowa State University. And I'm grateful that they named an auditorium, or a football field rather, after Mr. Thrice. But I'm grateful to have been with this institution for some 25 years, and I'm still teaching here. And I feel blessed to be at this great university. And I would like to thank the university for naming a building after me next to this great man, George Washington Carver. And I want all of you to go out of this place tonight thinking, what can each one of us do to make this state, this country, this world a better place in which to live? And I can tell you, folks, the only way that that's going to be accomplished is with love. Love is the greatest source of all. And God loved all of us. He gave all of us free will to make decisions because He was not a selfish God. He could have made all of us perfect. He really could, because nothing was impossible for God to do. But He loved mankind. And He said, I'm not going to be selfish. I'm going to give them the opportunity to choose themselves. no matter what it may be in life. So let us go forward this night, choosing love over hate, truth over lies, justice over injustice. That is what George Washington Carver would like for all of us to do this day. So I want to thank you. Stay healthy. I love all of you. God bless you, and let's let love rule. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon Estes, for those wonderful and inspiring remarks, and for really demonstrating, as the hug you just had right now, that we are one family, one community, striving to achieve the kinds of things that Carver has inspired us to do. Two quick messages, and then we break, and there's ice cream in the back, and please join us all for conversation. One is, when you came in, there was a reproduction of a paper that Ambassador Quinn wrote a few years ago. I encourage you to take a copy and to read it. It traces the story of Carver and Henry Wallace and others, and puts it together and in context, and it's a great opportunity to read that. Please do that. Another message is that Iowa State University museums have 3 art exhibits that will run from today until July 26th, so you have plenty of time to do that. Just go to the Iowa State website and search for Museums Carver 2024, and you'll find the information on those 3 different exhibits, and you can enjoy those and learn more about George Washington Carver. I want to thank you all for being here on behalf of the university and our partners, Simpson College and Tuskegee, and all the others that have contributed to make this possible. Thank you so much for being here. Let's continue Carver's great work and be inspired by him, and have a great evening. Thank you.